In the dimly lit corridors of the asteroid colony Garnet Nexus, Captain Kellen found a wounded creature collapsed by the emergency airlock. Blood trickled from the strange animal's fur as he carefully cradled it in his arms. Its shallow breathing brushed against his chest, sending a wave of uncertainty through him. The creature's fur, a peculiar pattern of silver and ash, was stained with dark red, unlike anything Kellen had seen in his 5 years as the colony's only medic. Whatever this was, it wasn't in the colony's databanks. "Stay with me," Kellen muttered, moving as fast as he could to the maintenance tunnels. The creature's claws dug deeper into his skin, almost as if it understood his words. The lift creaked as it descended, the heavy machinery groaning under the weight of their journey to Level 5, where Kellen's makeshift medical bay resided between storage units and forgotten supply rooms. The colony's designers had made it clear animals weren't a priority. He had been returning from the outer docks when he discovered the creature, lying lifeless by the airlock, its body riddled with what appeared to be energy weapon wounds. Kellen's mind raced. Who would target something like this? "Captain Kellen, you're getting blood on the floor again," the voice of his AI assistant chimed, breaking his concentration. "Mute," he ordered, gently laying the creature onto the medical table. "Full scan, priority 1. The diagnostic scanner above hummed to life, bathing the creature in a soft, calming blue light. Kellen worked fast, pressing a cloth to its worst wounds while the system processed the scan results. The overhead display flickered. Unknown species. Closest match, Veloraph lupus. 80% confidence. "Impossible," Kellen muttered. Veloraph lupus were sentient beings from the Bradian system, well known for their aristocratic ways and guarded privacy. This creature, though, was clearly an animal, yet strangely intelligent. The creature's eyes snapped open, amber pupils narrowing as it hissed, revealing razor-sharp teeth. It lashed out with surprising speed, its claws missing Kellen's face by mere inches. "Easy there," Kellen said softly, lowering his voice. "I'm trying to help you." The creature froze, its piercing gaze locked onto his. For a moment, Kellen felt as though it was studying him, assessing him with intelligence that felt almost human. After a brief hesitation, Kellen injected a sedative into its side, just enough to dull the pain without knocking it unconscious. As the drug took effect, the creature relaxed and sank back onto the table, exhaling a soft, almost human-like sigh. The scanner beeped, signaling completion of the analysis. The creature's anatomy appeared on the screen, more advanced than anything Kellen had ever encountered. 2 hearts, a reinforced skeletal system, and neural pathways that hinted at high cognitive abilities. "What are you?" Kellen whispered, cleaning the bloodied wounds. One injury, in particular, stood out, a precision strike to a major artery, almost as if someone had intended for the creature to suffer a slow death. For hours later, Kellen slumped into his chair, exhausted but relieved. The creature was stable now, resting in a recovery pod. Kellen had combined treatments from 3 different species to keep it alive. His best guess had worked, and the wounds were healing well. His communicator beeped, signaling an incoming message. Kellen's fingers, still stained with blood, swiped across the screen. "Attention all personnel," Commander Xander's voice crackled. "A diplomatic vessel, the Crimson Dawn, has requested emergency docking. Security protocols are now elevated to Level 2. All non-essential personnel are to remain in their designated zones." Kellen frowned. Diplomatic vessels weren't common in Garnet Nexus. The colony was far from any major interstellar trade routes. A soft noise from the recovery pod broke his train of thought. The creature had awoken, its ears pressed against its skull, eyes wide with unease. "You heard that, didn't you?" Kellen said, moving cautiously toward it. "Something about that ship has you spooked." The creature's gaze locked with his, and then, with slow deliberation, it reached out a paw toward him. Kellen paused before extending his hand. The moment their skin touched, a jolt of energy passed between them. A brief, powerful current that left Kellen stunned. "What in the name of the stars?" he muttered, stepping back. His comm device crackled again. "Captain Kellen to Docking Bay 6. Commander Xander requests your immediate presence with medical supplies. There's a diplomatic situation unfolding." Kellen's eyes flicked to the creature, who now attempted to rise from the pod, its strength clearly waning. "No, you stay right here," Kellen said firmly, pressing it gently back down. "You're in no condition to move." The creature growled softly but complied, its eyes locked on Kellen with intensity that made his skin crawl. "I'll be back," he promised. "Stay put." As Kellen exited the room, the weight of the situation pressed down on him. Whoever had tried to kill the creature had their reasons, and now a diplomatic vessel had arrived under mysterious circumstances. This wasn't a simple medical emergency. Something bigger was happening, and Kellen was right in the middle of it. 3 hours later, Kellen returned to the clinic, his muscles tight from the tense meeting with Commander Xander. The diplomatic visit had been a facade. He had been paraded in front of minor officials who were clearly searching for something. They had asked too many pointed questions, scanning his face for signs of deceit. Kellen hadn't told them anything. Instead, he'd spun a tale about traveling merchants and their exotic pets. He wasn't sure why he'd lied. Maybe it was the way the officials had described their missing property, or maybe it was their cold, calculating eyes. Something about them had triggered his instinct to protect. The doors of the clinic slid open, and Kellen froze. The recovery pod was empty, the glass cover pushed aside. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath, scanning the room. "Where are you?" A low growl echoed from beneath his desk. Kellen crouched down and found the creature, its amber eyes glowing from the darkness, its body hidden in the corner. "You shouldn't be out of bed," Kellen said softly, crouching beside it. "Your wounds need time to heal." The creature's ears twitched in response, and it made a chirping sound, a sound that sent a shiver down Kellen's spine. "It's trying to communicate," Kellen said to himself, realization dawning. "I think I'll need a name for you," he mused, holding out his hand. "How about Nyx? You remind me of the night sky, dark, but full of mystery." Nyx tilted its head, then reached out, placing its paw in Kellen's hand. Another electric jolt passed between them, weaker this time, but accompanied by a flash of something Kellen could only describe as gratitude. "Are you telepathic?" Kellen whispered, his voice tinged with awe. "Is that how you're communicating with me?" Nyx blinked slowly, then winced as it tried to move, its body still healing. Kellen carefully lifted it, noting how much heavier it was than it looked. Dense muscles beneath the fur. "Back to bed with you," he said, returning Nyx to the recovery pod. "Those weren't just regular officials out there. They're looking for you, and I don't think they're friendly." As he finished adjusting Nyx's bandages, Kellen instructed the medical AI to analyze the blood sample. Compare this with all known sentient species. As the system worked, Kellen sat beside the pod. His exhaustion was starting to catch up with him. 48 hours without sleep, but he couldn't rest now, not with officials snooping around the station, and a mystery growing deeper by the minute. "You're something special, aren't you?" Kellen murmured, watching Nyx's glowing eyes. Kellen stared at Nyx, watching the creature's amber eyes flutter, as the exhaustion finally overwhelmed it. The poor thing had suffered so much. "Someone went through a lot of effort to hurt you," he muttered under his breath. Nyx's paw pressed against the transparent recovery pod, reaching for him with an almost pleading expression. Kellen mirrored the gesture, placing his hand against the other side of the dome. Even through the glass, he felt a strange connection, an odd warmth that spread up his arm like an electric current. The system's voice broke his concentration. "Genetic analysis complete. Sample contains markers consistent with the royal bloodline of Phytosapiens, specifically from the Lian dynasty. Warning: possession of genetic material from the Lian royalty without explicit consent is a Class 1 diplomatic offense." Kellen's heart skipped a beat, his thoughts reeling. The Lian dynasty, the rulers of the most powerful feline humanoids in the region. If this creature belonged to them, what in the stars have I got myself into, Nyx? Kellen whispered, his voice barely audible. The creature's eyes had closed, finally succumbing to exhaustion. But Kellen couldn't shake the dread that had settled in his chest. He leaned back in his chair, fingers drumming anxiously. The discovery about the Lian dynasty meant everything had just escalated. His small, isolated life on Garnet Nexus had just collided with something dangerous. 3 hours later, After bypassing several security protocols and risking his access privileges, Kellen had pieced together a troubling picture. The Dean Royals kept companions, highly evolved creatures genetically linked to their owners, with whom they shared a psychic bond. These companions weren't just pets. They were extensions of the Dean Royals themselves. To harm one was considered a direct assault on the royal family. Kellen's eyes burned from lack of sleep as he scrolled through images of the current rulers. The young Baroness Kalira had recently taken control of the Dean dynasty following her mother's mysterious death. Political opponents questioned her ability to rule, and rumors of impending civil war were whispered in the corridors of power. Just then, a station-wide announcement chilled him to the core. The speaker crackled to life with Commander Xander's voice. "Attention, all personnel. We are honored to announce the arrival of Her Excellency, Baroness Kalira of the Dean dynasty. All section heads report to Docking Bay 3 for formal reception. Security protocols elevated to Level 1. Kellen's heart sank. Nyx's eyes snapped open. The creature's ears flattened, and it began making distressed sounds, scratching at the pod surface as though trying to escape. "That's her, isn't it?" Kellen murmured softly. "Your owner, the Baroness." Nyx's claws scraped against the chamber, its urgency growing. Kellen knew he couldn't allow the creature to be found. Not yet. He had no idea how much danger they were in, but the political storm that was clearly brewing had just become more personal. "You're not stable enough to move," Kellen said firmly, his voice unwavering. "And I don't trust the officials who were here earlier. We're going to hide you for now, until I know what I'm dealing with." He activated a hidden emergency protocol, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a small, concealed quarantine room. Kellen had never needed it before. "It's not comfortable," he apologized, gently placing Nyx inside, "but it's shielded from bioscans. No one will find you here, at least not until I know it's safe." Nyx's eyes met his, filled with a mixture of gratitude and fear. Then, with deliberate purpose, the creature leaned forward and pressed its forehead against Kellen's. The connection between them bloomed stronger than before, a deep, unspoken bond that carried feelings of trust, fear, and urgency. "I'll protect you," Kellen promised, his throat tightening with emotions he couldn't yet understand. He sealed the hidden room and left, feeling like he was stepping into something much bigger than himself. Whatever was going on, it was bigger than just a wounded animal. The galaxy had just opened up in front of him, and he had no idea what was waiting on the other side. Kellen quickly changed into a fresh uniform and headed for the diplomatic reception. It was time to meet Baroness Kalira and find out whether she was a threat to Nyx, or if she, too, was a victim in this tangled web of politics and royal intrigue. The main hall of Garnet Nexus, typically used for crew meetings and station functions, had been hastily transformed for the occasion. Drones polished every surface, and ceremonial flags, long forgotten in storage, had been unfurled to add a semblance of grandeur. Kellen stood near the back of the assembled crowd, his body protesting after 3 days without sleep. His mind kept returning to Nyx, hidden away in the clinic, still healing from the brutal injuries it had suffered. Commander Xander paced nervously at the front of the room, his uniform adorned with unfamiliar metals. He caught Kellen's eye, giving him a curt nod and gestured for him to step forward. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Hayes," Xander remarked, his voice laced with sarcasm. "This is a diplomatic reception, not a veterinary emergency." "Sorry, sir," Kellen muttered, stifling a yawn. "I've been busy catching up on some bacterial cultures." Before the commander could respond, the grand doors to the hall slid open with a soft hiss. The security detail formed an honor guard, and the room fell into a tense silence as the delegation entered. The first to step inside were 4 tall figures, humanoid felines with sleek black fur and ceremonial armor. Their eyes scanned the room with an intensity that sent shivers down Kellen's spine. They stepped aside to form a path for the final figure to enter. Kellen's breath caught in his throat. Baroness Kalira stepped into the room, her presence commanding attention. She was nothing like the cold, distant royal he had expected. Young with an air of confidence, she moved with fluid grace, making every human in the room seem stiff and out of place by comparison. Her fur, a pattern of white stripes against silver gray, mirrored Nyx's markings. She wore a form-fitting diplomatic uniform of deep crimson, which accentuated her lithe figure. A simple circlet of dark metal rested between her pointed ears, but it was her eyes that held Kellen captive. Amber irises, like Nyx's, framed in the deep black of her scara, swept the room with cool precision before landing on Commander Xander. "Your Excellency," Xander said, bowing deeply, "Nexus 7 is honored by your presence. Had we known of your arrival sooner, we would have prepared a more suitable reception." "My visit was unannounced," Kalira interrupted, her voice a smooth, melodic purr. Kellen could feel it vibrating in his chest. "I come seeking something precious that was taken from me." Kellen watched her closely, taking note of how her claws, like Nyx's, were extended slightly. Her calm demeanor was betraying something deeper, something she was trying to hide. "I see," Xander stammered. "My security team informed me of your missing property. We've conducted thorough scans of the station." A flicker of annoyance crossed Kalira's features at the word property. Her voice was cold when she spoke again. "My companion is not property. Commander, Nyx is an extension of myself. Our bond is sacred." Kellen's heart skipped a beat at the mention of Nyx's real name. So, he had been right. Some form of telepathic connection existed between them. "My apologies, Your Excellency," Xander said quickly. "I've arranged for a team to assist in your search. All station resources are at your disposal." Kalira's gaze slid over the officers in the room before landing on Kellen. The intensity of her scrutiny made Kellen's pulse quicken. He could feel something, an awareness, passing between them. Her pupils dilated ever so slightly as she studied him. "And who might you be?" she asked, stepping closer. Kellen swallowed hard. He was acutely aware of his rumpled appearance, the stubble on his face, and the exhaustion in his eyes. But he met her gaze with as much steadiness as he could muster. "Dr. Kellen Hayes, Your Excellency, station veterinarian and xenobiologist. A healer of animals?" Kalira's voice didn't carry the condescension Kellen had expected. Instead, she seemed genuinely intrigued. "Tell me, Dr. Hayes, have you treated any unusual creatures recently?" Every instinct in Kellen's body screamed at him to lie, to protect Nyx. But looking into Kalira's eyes, so much like Nyx's, he found that he couldn't. "I treat many species that pass through the station," Kellen replied carefully. "Some might be considered unusual, depending on one's perspective." A smile curved Kalira's lips, revealing the sharp tips of her fangs. "Indeed," she purred softly. "Perspective is everything." Just then, one of her guards leaned down to whisper in her ear. Kalira's expression shifted, hardening with resolve. "It seems my advanced team has detected traces of Thesionian blood in the station's lower levels," she announced, her eyes never leaving Kellen's face. "Near the medical facilities." Xander turned to Kellen with narrowed eyes. "Hayes, is there something you'd like to share with Her Excellency?" he asked, his voice sharp. Kellen's mind raced. Nyx was hidden in a shielded room. How could they have detected anything? Unless the connection between Nyx and Kalira worked both ways. Perhaps Kalira could sense Nyx's presence through their bond. "Your Excellency," Kellen began, turning to Kalira, "I believe we should speak privately about this matter." A ripple of whispers spread through the room as Commander Xander's face flushed with anger. "Dr. Hayes," Xander sputtered, "you will answer the question directly or face." "I will speak with the doctor alone," Kalira interrupted, raising her hand to silence the commander. "My guard will remain outside." "I must advise against this," one of her guard began, his voice low but insistent. "That wasn't a request, Ravik," Kalira replied, her tone brokering no disagreement. "The doctor and I will use the station's conference room. We are not to be disturbed." The guard, Ravik, shot Kellen a glare full of open hostility, but with a stiff bow, he stepped back, muttering, "As you command, Baroness." Commander Xander looked like he might explode, but he managed a strained nod. "Of course, Your Excellency. This way, please." As Kellen followed Kalira from the reception hall, he could feel the weight of every gaze on him, their stares sharp as knives. Whatever happened next, it would decide not only his future, but Nyx's as well. He had to tread carefully. The door to the conference room slid shut behind them with a soft hiss, leaving them alone. Kalira immediately dropped the regal posture she had been maintaining. She turned toward Kellen with a burning intensity, and for a moment he stepped back. "Where is Nix?" she demanded, her calm facade faltering as she struggled to hold herself together. "I can feel that he's alive, but in pain. What have you done with him?" Kellen met her fierce gaze. "I saved his life," he said, his voice steady. "He was attacked. Precision energy weapon wounds meant for a slow death. I found him 3 days ago, near the outer docks." Kalira's eyes widened, the walls of composure around her crumbling even more. 3 days. Her voice cracked, and she turned away, her shoulders trembling. The sight of her vulnerability softened something in Kellen's chest, and before he could think, he reached out and gently touched her arm. "He's going to be okay," he assured her, his tone gentle. "I've treated his wounds, and he's responding well to the regenerative therapy." Kalira stiffened at his touch, but didn't pull away. She turned back toward him, and Kellen was startled to see the moisture glistening in her amber eyes. "Take me to him," she pleaded, her voice no longer commanding but full of desperation. "Please." In that moment, Kellen knew with certainty that no matter who was behind Nix's injuries, Kalira wasn't the architect of the plot. The bond between them was real, deep, and undeniable, a connection that felt almost physical. "This way," Kellen said, leading her toward the door. "But we should avoid your guards. I don't trust them." Kalira's expression darkened. "Nor should you," she agreed, stepping closer. "Not all who serve me do so willingly." Her scent surrounded him, like exotic spices mixed with something wild. "Dr. Hayes," she said, her voice softening, "if you've truly saved Nix, you have my eternal gratitude. But understand this, we are now both in grave danger." Kellen's pulse quickened at the words, fear and exhilaration coursing through him. "Then we'd better hurry." As they slipped out of the conference room and into a maintenance corridor, heading toward his clinic, Kellen realized just how deeply his life had become entangled with one of the most powerful beings in the quadrant. Despite every logical reason to be terrified, he couldn't ignore the electrical awareness sparking between them with each shared glance. It was dangerous, indeed. The medical equipment hummed softly as Kellen adjusted the tissue regenerator over Nix's deepest wound. Kalira stood beside him, motionless, her amber eyes never leaving her companion's sleeping form. "The molecular pattern is fascinating," Kellen remarked, breaking the tense silence. "Your biology shares key markers with Nix's, but there are distinct differences I've never seen documented before." Kalira twitched slightly, a small gesture Kellen had begun to recognize as a sign of interest. "Our bond is both physiological and spiritual," she said, her voice softening. "The Vian royal line has maintained companion relationships for 16 generations. It's like biological quantum entanglement." Kellen adjusted the scanner. "That would explain how you sensed him, despite my shielded room." Kalira raised an eyebrow. "You understand quickly for a human." Kellen gave a tired smile. "I became a veterinarian because I believe all sentient beings deserve care and respect, regardless of their form. Intelligence comes in many packages." Something shifted in Kalira's posture at his words. She didn't speak for a long moment, but when she did, her voice was quieter, almost softer. "That's refreshing. In my court, such perspective is rare." For 3 days, they worked together in Kellen's clinic, treating Nix while dodging Kalira's increasingly suspicious guards. Commander Xander had been told that the Baroness was conducting a private investigation, giving them much-needed time to work. As the hours passed, their conversations shifted from medical care to more personal topics. Kellen found himself sharing stories of his childhood on a terraformed agricultural moon, where animals outnumbered people 20-1. "You chose exile on the station?" Kalira asked one evening, handing him a surgical tool before he could request it. Their rhythm had become synchronized. "Not exile," Kellen corrected. "Purpose. Nexus 7 needed a veterinarian. No one else wanted the position." Kalira raised an eyebrow. "So, you sacrificed personal comfort for duty?" Kellen nodded as he helped her dress Nix's healing wounds. "We have that in common, Doctor." Gradually, Kalira opened up about the pressure she faced as a young ruler, the advisors who undermined her authority, the neighboring systems testing her resolve, and the constant threat of assassination that had followed her mother's suspicious death. "I was meant to study xenobiology," she admitted one night, her voice low as Nix purred between them. "Not rule an empire before my 30th year. Yet here I am." Kellen gave a wry smile. "Crossing the quadrant for your companion, when most rulers would have sent agents." "Nix is not merely a companion," Kalira said fiercely. "He is my heart, outside my body. I could no more abandon him than cease breathing." Her passion stirred something deep inside Kellen. Admiration, yes, but also something dangerous and warm. Each accidental brush of their hands sent a spark through him. Each shared glance seemed to linger just a little too long. On the fourth night, as Kalira bent over Nix, adjusting a bandage, Kellen found himself staring at the graceful line of her throat, his professional detachment crumbling despite his best efforts. "You should rest," Kalira said, noticing the exhaustion in his eyes. "You've barely slept since I arrived." "I'm fine," Kellen insisted, but his body swayed on his feet. Her hand caught his arm, steadying him. Kellen felt the warmth of her touch like a brand, something undeniable and magnetic. "Even the most dedicated healer requires rest. Dr. Asher," she murmured. Kellen paused. "If we're hiding from assassins together, you might as well use my name." A smile curved her lips, revealing the delicate tips of her fangs. "Asher," she purred, the sound so soft it almost felt like a caress. The weight of something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of boundaries crossed, of protocols abandoned. Despite the stark differences between their species, despite the political chasm separating a station veterinarian from a galactic baroness, the attraction between them was undeniable. Kellen knew he was walking a dangerous path. She was the royalty. He was a human exile on a forgotten station. But as her amber eyes held his, filled with a warmth that matched the heat in his own blood, he couldn't bring himself to care. Some things transcended species, politics, and reason. "The neural activity is almost normal," Kellen said, studying the holographic display above Nix's sleeping form. "I'd say another 48 hours of regenerative therapy, and he should be stable." The clinic door exploded inward with deafening boom, throwing Kellen and Kalira to the floor. Smoke poured into the room as the emergency sirens wailed, the station computer announcing calmly, "Containment breach in Medical Sector 3. Security protocols engaged." Kellen's ears rang as he pushed himself up, frantically searching for Kalira through the thickening smoke. He found her crouched protectively over Nix, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead, her eyes wide with alertness. "Stay down," she hissed, as shadowy figures moved through the destroyed doorway. Two silhouettes advanced, humanoid but moving with mechanical precision. One raised an arm, and Kellen saw the barrel of a pulse disruptor aimed directly at Kalira. Without thinking, Kellen lunged for a nearby cabinet, grabbing a canister of aerosol sedative meant for large predator species. As the first assassin took aim, Kellen hurled the canister with all his strength. The explosion of pressurized gas engulfed the attackers, their mechanical movements faltering as the powerful sedative filled their lungs. But the second assassin managed to fire before collapsing, a bright beam of energy cutting through the smoke directly toward Kalira. She twisted at the last moment, but the beam grazed her shoulder, sending her sprawling to the floor with a pained cry. Kellen scrambled to Kalira's side as Nix let out a keening wail, struggling to rise despite his own injuries. The creature's pain was palpable, adding urgency to the already chaotic scene. "Emergency lockdown," Kellen ordered, pressing his palm against the blood pouring from Kalira's shoulder. His hands shook as he activated the emergency protocol. Protocol Haze Omega 6. Armored panels slid down over the shattered doorway with a mechanical hiss, sealing the room. Medical drones activated, filling the air with antiseptic mist as they began their automated task to clear the air of harmful particles. Kellen worked quickly, applying pressure Kalira's wound while scanning for any additional injuries. "The same weapon," she gasped, her pupils dilated with pain. "The same signature as Nix's wounds." Kellen's heart sank as the realization hit him. This wasn't random. Nix wasn't collateral damage in some political scheme. He was bait. Kalira nodded grimly, her fangs bared in a painful grimace. They knew I would come for him personally. This remote station, minimal security, perfect killing ground. Kellen helped her onto an examination table, right next to Nix, who had dragged himself closer despite his injuries. His growls, though weak, were full of distress. The weapon caused cellular disruption, Kellen murmured, examining Kalira's wound. Standard treatments won't work. Then I'd die here, Kalira stated flatly, her composure returning despite the pain. A fitting end for a fool who walked willingly into a trap. Not on my watch, Kellen replied firmly, his mind racing through the many treatments he had studied. There's an experimental therapy I developed for cross-species tissue regeneration. It's risky, but... Do it, she commanded, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that took Kellen by surprise. I trust you. Her words hit him with an unexpected force. He quickly began combining compounds never meant for the physiology, praying his theoretical knowledge would translate into practical treatment. The procedure required more than just scientific expertise. It was intimate by necessity. Kellen monitored her heartbeat manually, touching her in ways that crossed all boundaries of royal protocol. As he worked, their eyes remained locked, something profound passing between them with each labored breath Kalira took. My guards, she whispered as the regenerative serum began to take effect. They must have been compromised. Commander Xander, too, Kellen agreed grimly, looking over the unconscious assassins scattered in the room. These aren't random mercenaries. They're wearing modified Nexus security armor. The coup has already begun, Kalira said, strength returning to her voice as the treatment worked. My absence from the palace. They must have seized control already. Nix pushed his head under her hand, a deep rumble rising from his chest. Kalira absent-mindedly stroked his fur, her political mind clearly racing through the implications. We need to go, Kellen said, gathering emergency medical supplies. They'll send more when these two don't report back. Where? Kalira asked, struggling to sit up. The entire station is compromised. Kellen's mouth curved into a grim smile. I have a small medical transport for off-station emergencies. It's not much, but it's stocked for extended missions, and it's registered under a research designation, not my name. Kalira's eyes widened. You would flee with me? Become a fugitive from your own people? Kellen helped her stand, his voice steady. I became involved the moment I saved Nix. Besides, these aren't my people. If they're willing to assassinate a foreign dignitary. As sirens blared and security announcements echoed through the station, Kellen gathered Nix into his arms while Kalira, leaning heavily on his shoulder, palmed her emergency medical kit. Their eyes met in silent agreement. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Initiating emergency medical evacuation protocol, Kellen announced into the comm unit as he guided the small transport away from Nexus 7. Patient condition critical. Returning when stable. Commander Xander's voice crackled through the speakers, his tone urgent. Hayes, you're ordered to dock immediately. The Baroness has... Kellen cut the transmission with a sharp gesture. That should buy us a few hours before they realize we're not coming back. The medical transport, little more than a shuttle with advanced life support systems, hummed around them. The cramped quarters forced them into constant proximity. Kalira sat in the co-pilot seat, her regal posture a stark contrast against the utilitarian surroundings. Nix lay curled up in a makeshift nest between them, his breathing finally even and deep. We should reach the Galarian Nebula within 18 hours, Kellen said, checking the navigation system. There's an unregistered research outpost on asteroid KDX 419 that might shelter us. Kalira nodded, her eyes distant. By now, my enemies will have secured the palace. My loyal counselors, either imprisoned or executed. Decades of progress gone. Her hands trembled slightly, and she clenched them into fists. Kellen spoke gently. Your people still need you. We'll find a way back, she replied, the weight of her words carrying through the still air. She turned to him, her amber eyes filled with vulnerability. Why are you doing this? You could have handed me over, claimed a reward, lived in luxury. That's not who I am, Kellen replied simply. Besides, I've grown rather fond of Nix. Package deal, right? A faint smile ghosted across her lips before fading. She reached out and touched the stubbled line of his jaw with surprising gentleness. You are a strange human, Asher Hayes. The small vessel carried them through the darkness of space, automated systems humming, as they worked together to tend to Nix's remaining wounds. The mundane tasks, changing dressings, administering medication, monitoring vital signs, created a strange domesticity in their shared exile. Slowly, Kalira's formal veneer cracked. She shed her elaborate diplomatic uniform for simple medical scrubs, and without the trappings of royalty, she seemed younger, more accessible. She asked endless questions about Kellen's work, his childhood, his dreams, as if cataloging everything about the human who had upended her existence. In turn, Kellen glimpsed the person beneath the Baroness, the brilliant mind with a passion for xenobiology that matched his own, a leader who had sacrificed personal ambitions for duty, a woman who hummed ancient Dlian lullabies to Nix when she thought Kellen couldn't hear. On the third night of their journey, as the ship's lights dimmed to simulate evening, Kellen found Kalira trembling in the small galley area, a medical scanner clutched in her hands. What's wrong? He asked immediately, alert. Nix's neural readings, she whispered, her voice thick with concern. They're fluctuating. I can feel him pulling away. Kellen quickly checked the scanner, relief flooding through him. It's normal. His autonomous systems are finally reasserting. He's healing, becoming independent again. Kellen took her hands in his. It's good news, Kira. I thought I was losing him, she confessed, her usual strength crumbling. After everything, I couldn't bear it. Without thinking, Kellen pulled her against him, one hand stroking the soft fur between her ears as she shuddered with silent sobs. The contact was electric. Her body radiated heat, and Kellen could feel her heartbeat strong and quick against his chest. You're not alone, he murmured into her ear. I won't let you face this alone. She pulled back slightly, those alien eyes searching his face. In my culture, she said softly, such a declaration would be binding. The air between them charged with unspoken possibility. Kellen knew he should step back, maintain professional distance. She was his patient's owner, a political refugee, a member of a different species entirely. Yet, as her hand slid up his chest and her head tilted in unmistakable invitation, rational thought abandoned him completely. Their first kiss was tentative, a careful exploration of uncharted territory. Her lips were softer than he expected, the point of her fangs a delicate danger against his tongue. She tasted of spices he couldn't name, and the sound of her purr vibrating through their connected bodies sent a wave of heat through him. When they finally separated, breathless and startled by their own actions, Nix watched them from his medical bed, and Kellen could have sworn the creature gave them a look of feline approval. This complicates things, Kellen muttered, his voice rough. Kalira's answering laugh was wild, sending shivers down his spine. My dear doctor, she whispered, claws lightly tracing patterns on his nape. Things were complicated the moment you saved my heart. She drew him back to her, and Kellen went willingly, leaving caution behind in the vast darkness of space that surrounded their tiny vessel. Kellen explained as they shouldered their meager possessions. The only rule here is that old conflicts stay behind. No one asks where you came from or why you left. Their new home was modest, a single-story structure with adaptable environmental controls and a small garden enclosed by living bamboo. It wasn't the palace Kalira deserved, but for now, safety was their priority. The days melted into weeks as they established a routine. Kellen found work at the settlement's medical center, where his knowledge of various species made him a valuable asset. Kalira, using a modified identity, offered translation services, and her natural diplomatic skills earned them extra credits and valuable connections. In the evenings, they explored their new relationship with careful wonder. Every discovery was a delight. The sensitive spots at the base of her ears that made her purr, the way her pupils expanded when she was aroused, and the surprising strength in her lithe form. I never imagined finding happiness in exile, Kalira confessed one night, as they lay intertwined. Her fur was cool against his skin. Among my people, rulers mate for political advantage. Not this. And what is this exactly? Kellen asked, tracing the stripes along her shoulder. She considered the question, tilting her head in that distinctly feline way. Freedom, she finally said. With you, I am simply Kira. Not Baroness, not ruler, not symbol. It wasn't all perfect, though. Cultural misunderstandings sparked occasional arguments. Her royal expectations clashed with practical nature, and her territorial instincts often conflicted with his human boundaries. Yet, each reconciliation brought them closer. Kellen found joy in introducing Kalira to experiences her sheltered royal upbringing had denied her. Together, they explored the central lake of the settlement, where her initial disgust at the sensation of mud between her toes transformed into childlike delight. He taught her to cook simple meals, laughing at her fastidious approach to handling the ingredients. In return, she shared the cultural richness of her world, teaching him meditative techniques practiced by Dwean philosophers and recounting ancient legends beneath the strange stars of their adopted home. My royal tutors will be scandalized, Kalira said one afternoon as they shopped in the settlement's bustling market, her hand casually entwined with his. Scandalized by the haggling, or by the human holding your hand? Kellen teased. Her smile turned wistful. Both. Our traditions are rigid. In the upper echelons of society, interspecies relationships exist, but are never acknowledged. She selected a purple fruit, examining it with expert care. My grandmother would have you executed for touching me. Charming family, Kellen remarked dryly. Yet those same traditions are strangling our development, Kalira continued, her political mind never fully at rest. Our isolation has led to stagnation. We need fresh perspectives, new alliances. Kellen recognized a shift in her tone, the ruler re-emerging from behind the exile's mask. These moments happened more frequently as the weeks passed. No matter how much she embraced their simple life, Kalira was born to lead, and that calling tugged at her conscience. One evening, as the twin moons rose over New Harmony, they sat in their small garden while Nyx hunted insects in the flowering bushes. Kalira's silence held an unusual weight. You're thinking about home again, Kellen observed, his voice more a statement than a question. She nodded, her ears flicking restlessly. My people deserve better than usurpers and assassins. The longer I hide, the stronger my enemies grow. Kellen took her hand, feeling the careful retraction of her claws, a constant consideration for his frilier human skin. Do you regret this? He asked quietly. Us. Her eyes flashed in the moonlight. Never, she said fiercely. You and Nyx are my true home now. But then she paused, searching for words. What if I could have both? What if we could change things? You mean return? Kellen's heart tightened. The same people who tried to kill you are still in power. Yes, but they don't hold the people's loyalty, she countered, her strategic mind fully awakened. The Thean populace reveres tradition, but they also hunger for prosperity. If I return with new philosophies, new alliances, if I show them that cooperation with other species brings strength, the implications hung heavily between them. Returning would mean danger, politics, scrutiny, and the possibility that their relationship, born in crisis and nurtured in exile, would face its greatest test under the harsh lights of galactic politics. Whatever you decide, Kellen said, drawing her close, we'll face it together. As if understanding the weight of the moment, Nyx abandoned his hunt to press against them both, forming a circle of warmth against the cool night air. For now, their haven remained secure. But Kellen knew that peaceful interlude couldn't last forever. The ruler would eventually need to reclaim her throne, and when that day came, he would stand beside her, regardless of the consequences. The warning came at dawn, a coded message from one of Kalira's loyal retainers, who had finally tracked them to New Harmony. 3 ships had entered the system, their energy signatures matching known vessels used by the usurpers who had seized control of the throne. They found us, the message said. We have less than 2 hours. Kellen disabled the dwelling systems, erasing all evidence of their presence while Kalira encrypted their communications. Nyx paced restlessly, sensing the urgency. The medical transport is too recognizable now, Kellen said, checking his portable scanner. We need alternative transportation. Kalira's eyes glinted with familiar determination. I have an idea. An hour later, they were aboard a waste management vessel, hiding among refuge containers bound for the neighboring mining colony. The stench was overwhelming, but the ship's radiation signature masked their life signs from standard scanners. "Elegant accommodations, Your Excellency," Kellen quipped, trying to lighten the mood as they huddled in the cramped maintenance compartment. Kalira's answering smile was tight, but genuine. Still better than some diplomatic functions I've attended. Through the viewport, they watched 3 sleek military vessels descend on New Harmony, their silhouettes predatory against the dawn sky. Their peaceful interlude was officially over. The waste transport docked at Haggard's Point, a grimy mining operation where questions were discouraged, and credits were the only language universally understood. They bartered passage on a series of increasingly disreputable vessels, zigzagging across the sector to confuse pursuit. During their flight, Kalira made contact with her remaining loyal network. The news grew progressively worse. Her cousin Rav, the same guard who had accompanied her to Nexus 7, had declared himself regent. Public executions of her supporters had become commonplace. The Thean treaties with neighboring systems were being systematically dismantled. "He's isolating our people, making them dependent on his protection," Kalira growled, pacing the narrow confines of their latest temporary shelter, a decommissioned communications relay. Classic authoritarian tactics. Kellen monitored the secured channel, noting the increasing urgency in the encrypted messages. "Your loyalists are growing desperate. Without your return, they'll eventually lose hope." An alert chimed on their scanner. Ships were approaching the relay station's orbit. Kellen grabbed his medical bag, already moving toward their escape route, when the relay's ancient doors groaned and collapsed inward. Armored figures poured into the chamber, weapons raised. Nick snarled, positioning himself protectively before Kalira as Kellen reached for the small pulse disruptor they had acquired during their journey. "Wait," Kalira commanded, her voice cutting through the tension. "Examine their insignia." Kellen paused, noticing the subtle markings on the intruder's armor, different from Ravik's usurped royal seal. An older emblem. The lead figure removed her helmet, revealing feline features marked with ceremonial scars. "Commander Lyra," Kalira breathed, lowering her defensive stance. "My mother's royal guard." "My Baroness," the commander replied, dropping to one knee. "We've been searching for you since the coup." The resistance grows beneath Ravik's notice. Within hours, they were aboard the Shadowclaw, a sleek vessel hidden from official records. Kalira immersed herself in tactical briefings with her loyal commanders, while Kellen found himself suddenly an outsider, just a human among Thians who regarded him with suspicion, despite Kalira's obvious trust. Kalira's voice, steady and firm, carried a weight beyond its words. "I need you not just as my companion, but as my partner in this fight." The word companion carried a deeper meaning, an echo of her bond with Nyx, a deliberate acknowledgement of something profound and permanent between them. "I'm just a veterinarian," Kellen said softly, his voice filled with doubt. "Not a revolutionary." Kalira took his face between her hands, her claws carefully retracting. "You were never just anything, Kellen Hayes. You saved my heart twice over, first Nyx, then me." Her forehead pressed against his, the Thean gesture of deepest intimacy. "Now help me save my people." As the Shadowclaw accelerated toward Thean space, Kellen knew they were heading into the heart of danger. Yet, for the first time since leaving Nexus 7, he felt a certainty that transcended fear. Whatever awaited them in the capital, they would face it together. The unlikely veterinarian and his royal partner, rewriting the fate of 2 worlds. The medical shuttle descended through Thea Prime's atmosphere, its exterior emblazoned with universal quarantine symbols. Inside, Kellen adjusted his environmental suit, the helmet obscuring his human features. Kalira, similarly disguised, reviewed the falsified credentials that identified them as specialists from the Galactic Health Consortium, approaching the Royal Medical Facility. "Remember," Commander Lyra's voice came through their secure comms. "We can only maintain this deception for 12 hours before the pathogen is recognized as benign." The pathogen, a modified version of a common feline respiratory virus, was Asher's creation, It was engineered to present alarming symptoms while causing no lasting damage. It had been selectively released in the capital's lower levels 3 days earlier, creating the precise emergency they needed to gain entry. Ravik will be suspicious, Kalira murmured as the shuttle touched down on the palace's medical landing pad. He knows I wouldn't abandon my people. Which is exactly why we're entering through the most heavily guarded facility, Kellen replied, checking his medical equipment. Each piece concealed weapons or tools for their true mission. He'll expect subterfuge, not a frontal approach. Royal guards escorted them through decontamination and into the heart of the palace's medical wing. Kellen noted, with clinical detachment, how many citizens filled the beds. Ravik had allowed the outbreak to spread, prioritizing security over public health. Our first priority is assessing containment protocols, Kellen announced to the harried medical staff, his voice altered by his helmet's vocoder. We'll need access to environmental systems and population distribution data. The senior physician, a Dwean female with graying fur, hesitated. Those systems are under military control now. Regent Ravik's orders. Unacceptable, Kalira stated, her voice carrying the authority she had been born to wield. Consortium protocols supersede local governance during Class 3 outbreaks. Or would the Regent prefer we declare a sector-wide emergency? The physician's ears flattened in submission. I'll arrange access within the hour. They mapped the palace's security systems and confirmed the location of loyal staff who had survived Ravik's purges. Commander Lyra's team, disguised as medical support personnel, had strategically positioned themselves throughout the complex. As night fell, Kalira and Kellen made their way to the Central Environmental Control Hub, the nexus from which they could implement the next phase of their plan. Security checkpoint ahead, Kellen warned, noting the armed guards. 2 sentries with military-grade weapons. Kalira's posture shifted subtly. Follow my lead. She stumbled forward, her breathing suddenly labored and audible through her suit's external speakers. Kellen rushed to support her, calling out in alarm. Medical emergency. Containment breach. The guards stepped back instinctively, the fear of contagion overriding their training. Kellen used a distraction to deploy a localized nerve agent, carefully calibrated to render the guards unconscious without causing permanent harm. His veterinary knowledge, originally intended for healing, had proven unexpectedly useful in combat situations. Inside the control room, they worked with practiced efficiency. Kalira overrode security protocols while Kellen prepared the modified atmospheric controls that would deliver Commander Lyra's signal, a subtle change in the palace's ambient temperature that would alert their allies to begin the coordinated uprising. Intruders in environmental control. A mechanical voice suddenly announced throughout the facility. Security lockdown initiated. We've been compromised, Kalira snarled, her fingers flying over the control panel. Ravik must have upgraded the biometric sensors. Kellen completed the temperature adjustments just as the first explosion rocked the palace. Their allies had begun the assault early, adapting rather than abandoning their plan. We need to reach the Grand Council chamber, Kalira said, discarding her cumbersome disguise. With evidence of Ravik's treason, I can invoke the ancient right of challenge. They fought their way through increasingly chaotic corridors, loyalists clashing with Ravik's forces as a carefully orchestrated rebellion unfolded. Kellen's medical training served a grim purpose, as he targeted pressure points and vulnerable anatomy with precision, incapacitating opponents with minimal force. Outside the council chamber, they found Commander Lyra wounded but standing guard, a circle of fallen enemies surrounding her position. Ravik is inside with the remaining council members, she reported, blood matting her dark fur. He's threatening executions if the rebellion isn't crushed immediately. Kalira's eyes met Kellen's, a silent communication passing between them, the culmination of months of shared danger and intimate understanding. I'll create a distraction at the service in trance, Kellen said, checking his remaining equipment. You challenge him directly. He'll kill you, Kalira growled, her claws extending involuntarily. Kellen smiled grimly. He'll try. Before she could object further, Kellen kissed her fiercely, heedless of Commander Lyra's startled expression, and disappeared down a side corridor. Minutes later, as Kalira burst through the chamber's main doors with Commander Lyra at her side, The emergency ventilation system exploded in a cascade of smoke and debris. Through the chaos, Kellen slipped inside, positioning himself among the panicked counselors. Ravik stood on the ceremonial platform, his ornate regalia failing to disguise the madness in his eyes. "The traitor returns," he snarled, drawing a ceremonial blade. "Come to die with your remaining supporters, cousin?" "I come to reclaim what is mine by right of blood and law," Kalira replied, her voice carrying throughout the chamber. "I challenge you under the ancient right." Ravik's laugh was hollow. "Challenge you? Bring a wounded commander and expect to overthrow me? My forces control the capital." "Not anymore," Commander Lyra stated, activating a holographic display, showing Ravik's troops surrendering throughout the palace. "Your mercenaries abandon you as we speak." Ravik's composure cracked with a feral scream, and he lunged at Kalira, blade slashing toward her throat. She sidestepped with the fluid grace Kellen had come to adore, but Ravik's second hidden weapon, a plasma pistol, appeared in his hand, aimed at her heart. Kellen moved without conscious thought, years of precise medical work translating into perfect aim. He threw a surgical scalpel, and the blade embedded itself in Ravik's wrist, causing the energy pistol to discharge harmlessly into the ceiling. Ravik howled in pain. "Interference!" Ravik shrieked. "An alien intervenes in sacred combat. The challenge is invalid." "Not interference," Kalira corrected, advancing on her wounded cousin. "Alliance. Dr. Hayes acts as my lawful companion, just as Nyx does." The striped creature padded into the chamber, taking position beside Kellen. "The ancient laws make no specification about the species of one's companions," Kellen said, his voice steady. A murmur ran through the gathered counselors. The technical reading of their most sacred traditions was clear. Kalira disarmed her cousin and forced him to his knees. "The council will judge your crimes," she declared, "but the people will witness your shame." As royal guards loyal to Kalira secured Ravik, Kellen stepped forward to stand beside her, no longer hidden, no longer in disguise. His human presence on the ceremonial platform sent another ripple of shock through the assembly. "Counselors of Thea," Kalira announced, her voice steady and clear, "I present to you Dr. Asher Hayes, the man who saved your rightful ruler, who helped devise the strategy that liberated our capital, who stands as living proof that our future lies in cooperation, not isolation." One by one, the counselors bowed their heads in silent recognition. Destiny and duty converged as Kellen stepped forward to stand beside Kalira, his human resolve intertwining with her royal legacy. With the rebellion affirmed and the old regime crumbling beneath the weight of truth, a future was born, one of transformative unity, with a bond between a simple veterinarian and a defiant baroness would illuminate the path toward healing, not just of bodies, but of entire worlds. As the cosmos whispered infinite hope, Kellen and Kalira exchanged a final determined glance, sealing their vow to forge a new era of compassion and strength that would echo through the ages.